everyone, and welcome to our Devtoberfest session, Build Your Own React Application with UI5 Web Components for React. My name is Marcus, I'm a front-end architect at SAP, and with me is my colleague Lucas, who is a front-end developer at SAP, and we are both working on the UI5 Web Components for React project. So let's directly dive into it. First of all, let's take a look on UI5 Web Components and their ecosystem. So if we look at this slide, we can see that the UI5 Web Components are a central part of the SAP UI technology ecosystem because both the visual design and the behavior of UI components is defined by the UI5 Web Components, and they even found their way into the classical SAP UI5 framework. In addition to the plain web components use, we have also programming model layer adoptions for two frameworks, in this case Angular, and the topic of today's session, UI5 Web Components for React. So let's directly dive into the details of UI5 Web Components for React. So first things first, UI5 Web Components is based on custom elements, and custom elements are supported in all modern browsers. And as custom elements are also basically just HTML elements, the question may come up, why do we even need a React wrapper? Because custom elements are framework agnostic. So the unfortunate thing for React is that the current heavily used versions of React, so 16, 17, and 18, all have some shortcomings when it comes to using custom elements in your React components. And to name three, on the one hand side, we have an incorrect handling of Boolean attributes. On the other hand, custom event handlers are not attached. And in addition to that, we have also some inconsistencies with standard React props. But let's go through these issues step by step. So the first issue is the incorrect handling of Boolean attributes. So in this sample component, we have two buttons. The first button should actually be enabled because the button one should be disabled prop is false. And the second button should be disabled because the respective prop is true. But if we now look on the right-hand side and see the two buttons, we can see that both buttons are not clickable. And why does this happen? So the first button has a property disabled false, but React isn't aware of the fact that disabled is actually a Boolean property, and it does not omit the Boolean false for custom elements like it would, for example, do for a standard input or a standard button. So actually in the HTML DOM, both buttons have a disabled property, and this is why the web component gets disabled. But we can fix that. So an easy way to fix that is that each Boolean property has a fallback for all false values to undefined, because what happens now is the first button receives disabled false and goes to the fallback of undefined, which leads to the fact that React is omitting the attribute from the DOM. And the second button has disabled true, so our fallback does not come in effect here. So now we have our desired behavior that we can click on the first button, but we can't click on the second button. So far, so good, but let's directly jump into the next issue. And in this case, we have a UI5 calendar web component. And our scenario is that we want to display an alert on each selected date. But when I now click through the calendar here, nothing happens. This is also a shortcoming of React because React does not know that the UI5 calendar is emitting an event which is called selected dates change. So React doesn't know that it should attach the event handler to the document, and we can fix that as well. So in order to fix that, we need to write a little bit more code than for the Boolean fix for the buttons. So what we need to do is we create a ref, attach it to the UI5 calendar, and then we need to call a use effect, which runs on after the mount of the component. And we basically bind the event handler via plain JavaScript as you would do it in vanilla.js without any frameworks. So we have our ref, create our handler here. And if the ref is present, we add our event handler and remove it when the component unmounts. And if we now click through the calendar, we see, okay, our alerts are now coming up. But the developer experience of this is not really good. If you now imagine you have like 10 or 15 components in a larger component, like a dashboard or something, then you easily end up with like 200 lines of code, the boilerplate just for the event handlers. So maybe we can do better, but let's come to that at a later point in time. The third issue is that the class name attribute does not work. So if you want to apply a custom class name to React for all standard attributes, for all standard elements like input, span, paragraph, you can just do that with class name equals and then the name of your CSS class. So in this case, it's text color red. But we can see for the UI5 label, this doesn't work because the label is still gray. So let's fix that as well. Also here we have the same issue that React isn't aware that UI5 label or any other web component is a custom element. So it does not know that it should map the class name React prop to the HTML attribute class. So we have to write directly class for the custom element, which works fine and isn't that much effort, but also somehow inconvenient because you use like class name 90% of the time, and now a web component comes and you have to use class now. So I think that there should be a better way. And the question is, can we somehow improve the developer experience? And our answer is yes, we can. And the answer to that is UI5 Web Components for React. With UI5 Web Components for React, we are providing wrapper components for all UI5 Web Components. And what these wrapper components are doing, they are basically proxies around the UI5 Web Components, and they are dealing with all this complexity and special handling things you need to do in React. And you can just use the UI5 Web Components in React as if they were regular React components. In addition to that, we also provide complex layouts built on top of UI5 Web Components, for example, the ObjectPage, DynamicPage, or also some charts in case you need to build some dashboarding solutions. And in addition to that, we also adjusted the type definitions for React because, for example, there are some types like React Node, which only exists in React, but not in standard HTML. So let's also go through it step by step again. So first thing, the Boolean prop handling. On the left-hand side, we have our fixed sample with the plain UI5 Web Components implementation. So remember, we are going here for the fallback solution or undefined. And now with UI5 Web Components for React, you can see the changed import here. We are trying to do the straightforward thing again by just passing the Boolean property to the button component. And if we now look at it, the first button is now actually enabled. I can click it, and the second button is disabled, which is exactly what I wanted to achieve. So we can put a tick mark on here. Then the second issue were event handlers. Again, on the left-hand side for comparison, the old solution, on the right-hand side, the new solution with UI5 Web Components for React. And you can see here, we can just pass our event handler inline like you would do it for any other React component. And if we now click through the calendar, we can see, okay, our alerts are basically coming up. So that's exactly what we wanted to achieve. And yeah, we also have support for standard HTML props in React. So remember, we had to transform class name to class in order to make it work. And in this example here, you can see that we can still use the class name as for any other React component. And we are also passing through all other attributes which you may use, like area attributes, data attributes, title, if you want to display a tooltip here. And yeah, that's basically the part for our wrapper. As mentioned in the introduction, we have also support for complex layouts and charts. So in this example, we have built an object page on top of UI5 Web Components. So if you look into the details, you can see we have the breadcrumbs web component, the buttons, message strip, the title, some links, and we composed that for you into a reusable object page component, which is a complex layout which can be used as root layout for your application if you wish. In addition to that, we also built some charts. So in case you need to build a dashboarding solution, charts are always handy in my opinion. So in this example, you can see our line chart, tooltips for each dimension. And yeah, we also provide donut charts, line charts, stack bar charts. You can just explore them in our storybook in case you're interested in them. And the third part of our wrapper is the adjusted TypeScript typings for React. So if we look at the site navigation component, for example, we can see that there are 3 slots, like the children, fixed items, and header. And in the UI5 web components, these slots are typed as HTML element or HTML element array because that's what they actually are. They are using HTML elements, but React doesn't really like passing HTML elements directly. So in the React typings, there is a special thing of React Node and React Node array. And this is exactly what our wrapper is also taking care about, making sure that you always get the best type ahead completions right at your fingertips while developing the components. And with that, enough theory for now. I'm passing over to Lucas, and it's now time for the hands-on session.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm Lucas, and I'm also a developer at SAP. And in my part of the session, I want to show you how you could create a basic movie database from scratch by leveraging UI5 Web Components for React. For this, I will use 10-stack query for data fetching and updating, and also React Router for routing. And with that, let's jump right into it. And what you can see here is the result of our bit template. And I also already installed all necessary dependencies. That includes React Router DOM and also 10-stack query. Also, I already started the local host. Now, what is important when working or when using UI5 Web Components for React inside your project is that you import the assets if you want to use theming or localization features, for example, and also that you always wrap your application inside a theme provider, because otherwise some components just won't work. Then we can jump into our app.tsx, remove this flex box here, and also adjust the title to let's use movie database here because we want to create a movie database, right? And we can also adjust the logo. For this, we're just using the standard SAP logo. I just quickly copy that. Okay. And we can remove the profile avatar because we don't need that in our application. Okay, now here you can see that we're currently using the Sub Horizon theme. You will find out more about theming later on that session, but the default theme is currently Fiori 3 or Quartz. But as we want to show you the application with the newest theme that is Horizon, I'll change that in our index.html. Yeah. Okay, then quickly adjust some CSS here. First of all, the margin of the body should basically all page components come with their own padding or margin, and on our intro page, we don't need that as well. So let's remove it globally and set the height to 100, the viewport to use the whole screen, and also set a background color so all our application is consistent across pages. Now we can directly implement some routing. For this, we use the browser router of React Router DOM. Just wrap our application with it, and easy as that, we have now routing capabilities. Now we can clean up a bit. Okay. And now we can add our routes. For this, we're using the routes and the route component. First, import it from React Router DOM again. And then define our first route. The first route should be a details page. So path should be details and the respective movie ID. The syntax with the points is a placeholder basically. So later in our URL, this will be the actual movie ID. And then we also create a route to our home path. This is just a slash. Okay, now of course nothing is rendering because we haven't added these components yet. Oh, and what I'm also doing here is just adding another layouting component so that we have overflow available and also that the content stretches to the whole screen. Okay, let's implement details. Just return a string. It should be just for demo purpose right now. And do the same for home. Then we can import them real quick. Yep. There we go. Now you can see, now we're on the home page. We type in details and then movie ID. We're on the details page. Now, but when clicking, usually when you click on the logo of a page, you are redirected to the home page, right? Let's implement that as well. For this, we can use the onLogoClick prop, our event, and use create a handler for that. And inside the handler, we want to navigate to our default route, basically. For this, we can import a hook. It's called useNavigate, also from React Router DOM. Use that here. The hook returns a function, and inside this, as first parameter, we just pass our path. So now, if you click on the logo, we are back at home. Okay, now inside home, we want some content. For this, we can, or we use the table to show all of the movies. The table offers the columns prop, and inside the columns prop, we define our table columns. There we go. First column should have the heading title. Second one here, and this third one revenue. Now, what is important about some of the properties or some of the props we are offering when they are web components is that web components usually offer slots. Slots are there. They are basically passed as children that the component knows where to render them. So they are basically props like you would use in React, but with our wrapper. so that it's more like as you used when using or when working with React. We decided to offer them as props as well. But you can, of course, also just render them as slots. So let's add the slot attribute here, or prop. Render them inside the body. Oops, no. And as you can see, they are still displayed because of that slot prop. Okay, let's remove that. We also outlined that in our documentation of each prop, if it's a slot prop, because then also not all, you cannot pass all types of React Node. For example, string is not supported. So now to fill the table, we will now connect our app to our backend. For this, we're using, like I said in the beginning, Tensor Query or React Query. And again, we need to wrap our application inside a provider. For this, we need a query client. And then the client provider that, as the name suggests, provides the client to the application. And there we go. Now we can use React Query. So we can use query, and use query accepts an options object, and the first property you need to set is the key, basically. So when updating the data, that it's only updating the respective query, basically. So for this, we're using the query key, use an array here, and just call it table data. The second option that you pass here is the query function. And this one is responsible for fetching the data. And as you can see, we just use the default fetch here and connect to our endpoint and return it as JSON. Yeah. So now we can display this data. The table accepts rows as children. So let's do that. Table rows, row. As we're using a map here, we have to set a key. Otherwise, React. Otherwise, if we would change the array, basically, React would update or would have problems with updating, with performant updating the table component, basically, or the map we have here. And by setting the key has always have to be unique. We make sure that the table is only updated when necessary. So let's fill these table rows with table cells and use the respective field. Now, as you can see here, the data is displayed, but we have but our IDE doesn't know what the data is actually, what the content of the data is actually. So we use table data here as interface, and there we go. Here, now we know revenue, for example, is a number. So yeah, but this number doesn't look that good, not that human readable, right? So I quickly just copy paste here something I prepared. We use the number format and just use USD and the English representation of this, or the for the revenue, basically, and just format it. So this should be better. Okay, now we have our table, but we still need some styling. Need to do some styling, because this doesn't look that good. There's no margin, there's no padding, and it's all too crowded, basically. So for this, we can use the use responsive content padding hook. That's something UI5 Web Components for React is offering. So we are offering that in our base package, and it's adding a padding it's returning a class name, a string, that you can leverage inside your class name prop. So you can set padding depending on your screen resolution or more on the size of the component actually, because what you have to pass to this hook is the reference to the element the padding should be applied to. There we go. Now we have our ref and already our class name. Now we just have to pass the ref inside this hook or this parameter of the hook. There we go. Now we have a padding on the left and right side. Also, we want some padding on top and bottom, so we just use padding block here. And yeah, that looks better. Okay. Now, what we want to do here is we want to navigate on each row click. So we have to make these row active, because before we couldn't click them, there was no indicator for that. And for this, we can use the type property. Properties like that, that are basically enums, always accept the string with the respective type then. So in this case, active, or the enum representation. I always prefer the enums because, for example, if something changes, you will be notified. This shouldn't be the case, except for major updates. But it's just easier to handle if you also have autocomplete if you use the enum, otherwise not. Oh well, you have, depending on your ID. Sorry about that. Now we add a handler for the row click. So this is called, as the name suggests, every time a row is clicked. And here we need the event parameter, because as it's a custom event, there are inside the custom event you can add some properties basically. In this case, we access the row property that is a reference to the clicked row element. Now, as we want to access the ID or navigate to the ID, we just pass the move ID as inside the data set of the element by using the data minus syntax. And then we import use navigate again. Okay, that didn't work. Now manually, I'll do it manually. Background DOM, okay. And inside the handler, we can then use the row and its dataset field ID. Okay. Now, when we click on a row, we get navigated to the respective movie. Okay, let's implement the details view. Inside the details, we want to have an object page that is a page layout component, so it should cover the whole screen. And the object page receives section as children. Each section needs an ID, should be unique, like every ID should be. And also we add a title text. First one is summary, then here's a space. Okay, now the second one will be the main authors, not authors, actors, sorry. And the third one, the reviews. Yep, there we go. Okay. Now, to actually display some data here, some content here, we will have to fetch data again. So we import use query, use the key. This time we also add the movie ID. Also for the placeholder, but luckily we are using React Router, so we can use a hook here again that's called use params. So we get the ID, the movie ID. My auto import doesn't seem to work that good. And then we'll just pass that ID there and also fetch some data with our fetch. There we go. We can copy paste it again. And as you can see, it's basically the same endpoint, but just with an OBID. And that it only contains one movie. Okay, so then we can again create an interface, pass it to our query as generic value, and for example can start by adding a title to the object page header basically. Here you can have to pass the dynamic page title component, even though other components would be supported by types. But if you want to make sure you have the correct behavior, then use this component. Okay, and now as you can see, we have a title. Then we can also add some content. For this, we use the dynamic page header. That's the second part of the header section of the object page, basically. The dynamic page header accepts all React nodes as children. So you are free to render whatever you like in there. This time we just put two links in, one that leads to the trailer and the other one that leads to a shop where you can buy the movie. With links you have to be careful because other libraries also export them, so always use the correct import. Okay. Now, usually you would show an image on the details page of a movie, but yeah, for licensing reason we can't do that. So we just use a placeholder here. We use an avatar component and then import an icon from the UI5 Web Components icon. Yep, the picture icon. Yeah. And now we can import it from at UI5 Web Components icons package. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Now you can see we have a placeholder for the movie picture basically. For the subheader, we again can show the revenue here. Review revenue, but only if it's available. In this case, it's always available. I just wanted to show you that you can, of course, also use conditional rendering here. And we import the label component, use the string in there, revenue, and we also want to show a colon here. The advantage of using the prop instead of putting the colon inside yourself is that it's localized. So for some languages, there's a space in between, for others not. And this will fix that for use. Then, yeah, just put it down. And then we want to also see how this moving was rated by users. For this, we can again use a component, a UI5 Web Components React, the rating indicator. And the rating indicator accepts a value. And this value is coming from our backend, so we can just reuse that. There we go. But now, by default, this is an input component basically, so it's interactive, and we don't want it, so put it to read only. Okay. Now, if we navigate, you can see the different movies are displayed with the different ratings. Now, there was a space I forgot to add. Now format the revenue again. And there we go. Our header is finished. Okay, now for the first section, this is an easy one. We want to show the summary here. For this, we're just importing the text component and use the summary field of our data. And easy as that, we have a summary. For the actors, there's a string. Oh, I copied it wrong, but the actors is actually an array of objects. So we quickly create an interface for the actor. Pass that there. An array, yeah. Okay, now. And now we have to map our actors. First of all, let's just use a flexbox here. Flexbox is a component that is basically a div with some styling, with some sort of flex styles. So you have these props. You could also use a plain div for that, but for many people it's easier. I like the way I like to use it as well. For some more specific components, I still use a div there. So text and label. Actor label, actor character, of course. So now we can see avatar, we have Sam Worthington and play Jake Sully. To show the actual actor name in bold, we can use one of our theming parameters. That's the sub-bold font bold family. These are basically just CSS variables, and we imported from our base package the theming parameters. You could also use the standard CSS variables, but like this you have the autocomplete. Then we want to show a picture of the respective actor here, as we can do that as well. We'll use a placeholder, but first display it in a large size and also in a square shape. And then this time put an image in there. As you can see, an image in there. Yeah, now. And as you can see on the left here, yeah. I also already included some pictograms. So let's reuse them. We can copy and paste. And then we can use this person avatars array as our path, and we just show there are five pictures. So we can just use index modulo 5. And now we have, in this case, 3 pictures. Okay, this still doesn't look that good. So let's align them next to the name. For this, we have to move our key, because now the other flexbox, the row flexbox, is top level inside our map, and we want to center align it as well. Okay, good. At the margin, on the right side or on the end, so 0.5 rem should be enough. Yeah, perfect. And yeah, this looks like that in for all screen resolutions or component sizes. So let's add a grid here, so we can easily adjust that for smaller or larger screens. So now for medium screens, this is shown in a 2-row grid layout, a 2-column grid layout, and for small screens in a 1-column grid layout. This is default for the grid. You can also customize it. As you can see, I already copy-pasted the review data we need for our review section. And yeah, there's not much more to explain as we saw it before. So let's jump right into the implementation. First, we map the review data to display all the comments. Okay, then review.comment. There we go. 2 comments are available for this movie. And we can also create an interface again and use that as generic value for our query. And also, yeah, the review is an array, like I just said. So, okay. Then we can replace the div with a component of ours. For this, we will use the timeline component. The timeline can show entries in a chronological order, and we already sorted all the entries of the review data by chronologically in the backend. So the timeline accepts timeline items. Again, we need a key. This time we use the timestamp. And there we go. Looks a bit better, right? Now, for the name, we just pass the name of the author of the review, and then we can also add the time the comment was posted with our timestamp. Okay. So to show that there are persons, we can use a person placeholder instead of these gray dots on the left. Import it. Person placeholder, yeah. And there we go. No gray dots, but a person placeholder. Now the timestamp is not really human readable, so let's change that. We again use a formatter here. Just use the date object or create a date and format it, and then pass it to the corresponding prop. Okay, now this was basically the first part. Now we can also show the rating of what the user gave that movie. We implement a rating indicator. I can use the value, the rating, and we want to have it read only here as well. And for alignment, we don't need to do anything else because the timeline item itself aligns its children in a certain way. You could of course also use a flexbox there. Okay, and there we go. Now we have a rating indicator. And with that, our movie database is finished, except for one thing, theming. Now, in the beginning, I already showed you this script here inside the index.html, and there we go. Now you can see we can change the theme with this option. But for users to be able to change it, we need to implement something. So let's jump in app.tsx and add another shell bar item, or add a shell bar item to our shell bar. This is, okay, we need a shell closing tag here. Yeah. And also we want an icon on the shell bar item. That we choose the palette icon here, and also add a on-click event directly and the respective handler. Okay. Now first import the icon. You could also import all icons directly, but I prefer it that way. So now at the handler, we can also already add the event parameter here. And as you can see, now we have a shell bar item on the top right of the shell bar. To show the theme switch, we're going to use a popover. Import it and add a ref. because we are going to open the popover with the ref, or via its ref directly on the element with a method on the element. You could also do it imperative, but in this case it's easier that way because we need to have the target ref, there we go, of the shellbar item, because if you would just add a ref here, it would be the wrong element as it's an abstract element. You can find out more about that in our documentation. So we want to show it as a target ref, and there we go, it's shown. But it doesn't know that this method exists, so we pass the DOM ref of the popover to it, and now because it can be null, of course, and now it won't show an error here again. So inside we want to show the theme switch as a list, so we use that component, and also can directly use the import or copy paste the themes here, and then we'll map over the themes. There are more themes available, but these are the Horizon themes. So like I said in the beginning, the new standard themes. Okay, we want to show the theme name, and there we go. Now we have a popover with all of the themes inside of it. Yeah. For accessing the key, we again add a data attribute. So we can add access it in a specific handler. Let's implement that as well. First, make the list selectable, and we want a single select here. So users see which theme is actually selected. And then add the handler. This onSelection change event is called every time a theme is selected or a list item is selected. So one more thing we notice here is the padding that comes with the component, but in this case doesn't look that good. As this padding is inside the shadow root of the web component, the web component offers a part attribute, and with the help of this pseudo element, we can remove the padding. So each element inside the shadow root, which has a part attribute, we can access via standard CSS. This attribute is then part equals content, and then we can access it here. And now, as you can see, no, you can't see nothing now. Now, when we add the class name, then there is no padding anymore. Okay, now inside the handler of the selection change event, we can switch the theme. For this, we need to import a setter of UI5 Web Components, because UI5 Web Components are responsible for all of the themes, or are implementing all of the themes, and also the theme switch. And we also will need the getTheme getter. And now use the theme, set the theme, and then we can again use the details here. In this case, it's target item. And we want to take the dataset key of the target item. And now, if we switch the theme up, no, I still have the DevTools open now. You can see that we can quickly change themes here. But we have one issue. When we now look at our icons in dark mode themes, you can't really see the outline of this pictograms. They are pictograms actually. So let's change that. For this, we have to implement a state. So our React application actually knows what theme is currently selected, as the set theme is only a JavaScript method and React doesn't know anything about that, about the value behind it, because we don't have a observer. And to control our whole application, or to let our whole application know, we use a context, a React context here. So first create a context, then add context provider around our whole application. There we go. And as value, we use theme. Now, we don't set the state theme yet, so we can just do exactly the same as we do with the set theme method. Okay, now we can go into our details component and use this context here. Okay, and depending on what theme is now selected, we can use different images. I prepared it as well, and then just add a const if it's dark mode, or let's say what dark mode is. So one theme, the key has dark inside of it, the other an HCB, high contrast black, and if it's dark mode, then the standard, the dark mode pictures should be used, otherwise the standard pictures. And now instead of person avatars, we use these pictures. And now if we change the theme, you can see it's a white outline instead of a black one. And the same goes for, or the other way around, it's in the bright themes. Thank you for watching the hands-on part of our session. And with that, back to Marcus.
Thank you, Lucas. Lucas just showed how to use UI5 Web Components for React in a client-side rendering app using Vue.js. But in the React ecosystem, there's another really hot topic right now, which is called server-side rendering. And a very popular framework for building server-side rendering apps is called Next.js. In the following minutes, we want to give you a brief overview of how to use UI5 Web Components for React in Next.js using server-side rendering. In order to show you how it works, we enhance the existing application with a new functionality, which is creating reviews, so that we can show you how to interact with data in Next.js. So let's take a look. So here we are back in our movie database application. As mentioned before, this is basically the same application Lucas just showed to you using the vid template. So I'm not going to go through all these steps now, but rather focus on the details, which you need to do differently when using Next.js. In this case, I'm using the pages router, but we have also a template available if you want to use the app router instead. So first of all, let's go through the things you need to do for the whole application setup. First of all, in the document, we need to wrap our whole application in the JSS provider, which is exported from React.js. This is due to the fact that UI5 Web Components for React is using React.js internally to create its custom component styles, and therefore the JSS provider is filled with the Sheets registry, which is filled by server-side rendering in Next.js. When returning the document with all the server-rendered components, we are stringifying the server-side styles and add them to a div with the respective ID. Later on, in the _app directory, we are removing the server-side styles again. This is due to the fact that React.js hydrates on the client and recreate all styles which were created previously on the server, so we don't need those old server-side styles anymore. And in order to avoid any potential conflict, we are going to remove them. In addition to that, we are also creating the query client for React Query again, but this time inside the useState hook. We are using the useState hook here to ensure that the query client is not shared across multiple users or multiple requests, but really a new query client for each request. But as it's inside of the useState hook in the app, which is the root application node for Next.js, we can ensure that the query client is only created once for each and every component. In addition to that, we have our hydrate component here, which is an export of React Query as well. And with the hydrate component, we can read the page props, so the dehydrated state in this case. And with this dehydrated state, we can pre-fill all the queries for React Query on the server and avoid any potential client refetches, which would not be necessary for an initial call. So that's all for the basic setup, and don't worry, you don't need to remember all those things. You can visit the template section in our storybook and get started with the Next.js templates for both the pages and the app router. So that's all for the general setup. So let's dive into the movie database list. Here in our list of movies, we are basically dealing with static data because we are fetching the list of movies once, and the search filtering is happening on the client, so we don't need a fresh request to the server again. So in my opinion, this is a pretty good opportunity to replace the use query call from the client with get server-side props in Next.js. The benefit of get server-side props is that it runs on the server, which usually has a way better internet connection than a client device. So I would expect that this call is now way faster. In order to do that, we are implementing the get server-side props function, doing the fetch against our movie database. And if the response is okay, we are turning the JSON as a list in the movies prop. Otherwise, we are just returning an empty array as movies. Now, in the home component, which is the whole page here, we are receiving movies as a prop. And this is already the list of the movies which were fetched on the client. So we don't need to call use query or something here anymore because we already have what we want. So we can just use the movies from here and put them into the use state for the filter data. And we can then on the server render all table rows. So with the initial load of this page, we are getting all the movies directly without any flickering. And yeah, that's already it for the index page. Now let's look on to the details page, which is a bit more interesting in my opinion. So first of all, what we have here, let's go to the component first. We have our get server-side props again here. So what we are doing here in the URL, we are passing the movie ID, which is 1 in this case. And we are doing multiple requests here because on the one hand, we want to load all the static movie data like name, description, main actors, but also the dynamic content like the reviews. And those reviews can refresh because if a user creates a new review here, he also wants to see it in the list of reviews. So we are now splitting things here with the standard get server-side props thing, which I showed earlier, and prefetching for the query client. But let's go through it step by step. We are now doing two parallel requests here. On the one hand, we are fetching the static movie data for our given movie ID, and we are also fetching the reviews for the movie. If there is an invalid ID provided or we don't have the movie ID, we return the magic object not found true, and this causes Next.js to redirect to a not found page. So if we add like an invalid ID here, we are redirected to a 404, this page could not be found. So we already got the error handling covered for here. For the more optimistic case where a movie can be found, we are now creating a new query client, pre-fetch the query in which we are storing the reviews, and directly fill it with the reviews we have already fetched here on the server. And as props, we are returning now the movie details as well as the dehydrated state. And this loops now back to the app because here we have the hydrate component, which is accepting page props.dehydrated state, which is exactly what we are returning here. So now we have like the combination that the whole page is pre-rendered, but we can also create the review here and have everything ready in the React query client. So if we scroll down a bit, we can also see here, I scrolled way too far, we are still calling use query here for movies, movie details.id reviews, and the query function is fetching reviews for this movie ID just as it was before. If we now look into our dynamic page, we can see that we have the reviews with the header and the timeline where all reviews are listed after each other. But now the interesting thing comes, because let's create a new review. Therefore, let's jump into the create review dialog component, which is also accepting the movie ID. And in here, I extracted it into a separate hook for better readability. We have the use add review comment hook. In here, we are accessing the query client for the mutation again. And inside this mutation, where we are passing a payload, which is containing all the data for the new review, we are calling here our API again, pass our payload as post body, and if the response is okay and was successful, we are invalidating the query key for movies, our given movie ID, and reviews. With this invalidate query call, React Query now knows, okay, the data I have previously fetched, in this case for movies, one review, is now stale and not valid anymore. So it needs to be refetched through the query function we have defined here. So let's just try to do it. We have here our name. Let's say this is our test user and this movie was really awesome. And yeah, our comment is that it just was awesome. We submit the review and we can see that our review is here immediately. And yeah, that's the whole magic of using React Query with Next.js and UI5 Web Components for React. With that, we are already at the end of our session on how to build a React app using UI5 Web Components for React. Thank you so much for joining in. In case you have any open questions, just write them down in the comments below, and you can find all links to the materials, storybook, and code examples in the description box below. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via comments, via GitHub issues, visit our UI5 Web Components for React Slack channel. And yeah, with that, I would say happy coding.